Hello, this is Colin Harris from Knoware, continuing the series on hooking up SAS and Excel. This is the 6th technique in the series, and what we're looking at in this one is Proc Export on how to get data from SAS into Excel. As you can see from this slide, there's 11 different techniques that we're talking about. The other ones are covered in other videos. This video is focusing purely on Proc Export and the advantages, disadvantages, etc. of that particular technique. Okay, so a little bit of background first before getting into Proc Export itself. The next two techniques both rely on having the additional SAS product, which is SAS access to PC file formats. What this particular product allows is to use Proc Export and import. So import is importing information or data into SAS. It also allows us to use the Excel libname engine, and that's the next technique that we will talk about on the next video of the series. It also allows other capability as well, such as Proc DB load. That's a bulk way to load data into SAS environment. Now, in using this SAS access to PC file formats, or PCFF is the shortcut name, there can be some complications. If you have a Windows environment and everything is 32-bit, that's great. Away you go, nice and simply. But if you have a 64-bit Windows environment and a 32-bit Office version, we need to do something slightly different. Similarly, if you have Unix or Linux, you need an extra component, and that is called the SAS PC file server. This comes as part of the SAS access to PC file formats, but it is an additional configuration that you require. If you do require it in your environment, hopefully it's already set up for you and it's there to use, but if you're a new environment that is getting set up, you may find this is required. The comments in red, or the errors in red at the bottom there, is an example of the error that you may get if you try and use this capability, these techniques, and you haven't got the PC file server set up and you actually require it. So that's enough of that sidetracking into that. It's just important to alert you that that may be a possibility for your environment, and we'll move on to the actual techniques now. Okay, so Proc Export. What is this technique? What it allows you to do is run a procedure that does a very simple job. It simply takes a SAS table and creates an Excel file from that SAS table. As well as creating Excel files, it also allows you to create files of other types as well: flat files, comma-separated files, Lotus files, dBase files, a range of different file formats. What type of technique is it? It's a SAS push. So SAS is controlling the interface. You're running SAS code, and that generates the file that goes across and picked up by Excel. It's data that's being transferred, that is, it's a SAS table that's being transferred, as opposed to output, a procedure output that is being transferred. So it's purely the data. What is it creating? Well, what's it good for? It's good for creating Excel spreadsheets, but with no formatting. It's just purely taking the data across and creating a plain and simple Excel spreadsheet. So that's one of the things it's good for, but it's also good for updating simple pre-formatted Excel spreadsheets. Now, this is the first technique in the series that has allowed us to update an existing Excel spreadsheet. What's the advantage of that? Is that you may have a formatted spreadsheet that you have customized. You've got some nice headings on there, some changes of fonts, some graphs perhaps, some other things in there. And it allows that formatting to be kept in place and for you to update that spreadsheet with some updated data. What's the code? Very simple, very straightforward. As you can see there, Proc Export. We simply say this is the data table we're interested in. Out file defines where the resulting data file is going to be created. So here we're creating a file called cars export. DBMS, Proc Export is a generic procedure to write out in lots of different formats. That's why it's got this DBMS format, because it could be Oracle or a whole range of other things. So we're telling it that it's Excel we want, and the particular version of Excel as well, because the different versions have different file formats. So this is explicitly saying we want this to be Excel 2007, and we're using the replace option. That says if the file exists already, replace it, just overwrite it. And what is the worksheet we're going to write this data into? It's going into the worksheet called All Cars. Okay, so that's an example of not using a PC file server, just a straightforward where everything is the same 32-bit. If you have to use PC file server rather, there's a couple of extra bits that you need to put in your Proc Export. First of all, you need to create a file of a slightly different suffix, XLSB rather than XLS. We use a different dBMS format as well. It's XLCS rather than, remember before we had XL 2007. And there's a couple of extra options we need here also. Server. This is going off to a server that does the work for us and creates that particular file. So we need to tell it the name of the server, in this case it's SAS93. Port, the default port is 9621. And how does it do the security checking? We're saying here we use SSPI. What that is simply doing is using your user ID that you've logged onto your Windows environment as. It picks up that credentials and passes that through to the server. So a couple of extra things if you are using PC Files Server. What does it end up with? Ends up with that resulting spreadsheet that if you've been following the series through, we've seen this spreadsheet half a dozen times before, creating an Excel spreadsheet just in the plain and simple data coming across into Excel. The second thing you can do is, rather than just creating a spreadsheet from scratch, is update or overwrite some parts of the spreadsheet. So here we are using that same cars table, but this time we're just bringing out the American cars, so just subsetting out cars produced in America. It's the same spreadsheet we're talking to. We're using the PC file server, so it's got those components as well in this particular piece of code. And the sheet is now a different sheet. We're saying USA cars. When we run that, it doesn't overwrite the spreadsheet. It adds or updates the existing spreadsheet by creating this additional worksheet. So we run that, and the resulting Excel spreadsheet has now got two worksheets or two tabs. We've got the existing piece of code created all cars, and this piece of code we just ran created this a second worksheet called USA cars. Okay, so what's the pros and cons for this technique? It's pretty simple code to write. Change just a few lines to get your results. That means because it's in code, you can run it in batch, run it whenever you want. I just want to run that program now, just rerun it, or I want to run it every night or every week or every month. It can just be scheduled to run, as opposed to some of the interactive approaches where you have to click your way through to create it. Multi-sheet support, as you've seen already with the example we just showed, and it can both create brand new spreadsheets or update existing spreadsheets. On the downside, even though you can update existing spreadsheets, there's some limitations there. It can't write to a range. It purely updates data starting in position A1 of a particular worksheet. And that may be fine. You may be able to use that to get what you want, but it's not as flexible as the next technique, which is the libname engine, which allows you to write to any part of a worksheet using ranges. Second one is there, SAS formats. We have to be very careful there. SAS formats aren't honoured in all cases, so check very carefully if you're using SAS formats, how to deal with that. And earlier in the series I referred to a SAS paper that talks about SAS formats and how to use them with Excel. Refer to that paper to give you lots more details on how to handle formats appropriately and get the correctly formatted information across to the Excel spreadsheet. What do you need for this technique? Of course you need base SAS, as you do with everything. You also need that additional product, SAS PC file formats. And in terms of skills you require, it's purely SAS skills. There's no additional programming languages or expertise required, just knowledge of the SAS language. Thanks for watching this video, which is part of a series on hooking up SAS and Excel. The full PowerPoint presentation is available at knoware.co.nz, which includes references to good papers that provide more details.